What if your job description included avoid cobra bites while digging canals? Thousands did this in deadly heat, no OSHA inspector in sight. Ancient Egypt's workforce handled jobs so dangerous or disgusting, they'd make a modern safety officer faint. We're talking about pest controllers fighting rats in pitch-black granaries, brickmakers mixing dung with bare feet, and temple sweepers who couldn't speak or sit for hours. Ever wonder who cleans a god's house all day without speaking or sitting? These weren't just jobs, they were nightmares. But which of these nightmares topped them all? You'll want to stick around to find out. Let's start with the workers who moved mountains. Literally, quarry haulers faced the kind of job that would make anyone reconsider their career choices. In ancient Egypt, these workers spent every daylight hour dragging limestone blocks weighing 2 tons or more across burning sand, barefoot. Imagine ropes carving your hands to ribbons and blocks crushing your feet if you slip. This wasn't a side gig, it was a daily ordeal that built the pyramids and temples we still marvel at. Archaeological digs at the Giza Plateau tell the real story. Researchers have found skeletons with compressed spines and shattered pelvises, clear signs of years spent hauling impossible weights. Many didn't live past their 30s. Quarry haulers woke before dawn, downed stale beer just to keep pulling until muscle, mind, or sunstroke gave out. If you collapsed, there was no rescue, just the risk of being crushed by the very stone you were moving. Work gangs moved these stones with nothing but wet sand as lubricant and pure muscle. Modern tests show it took at least 20 men just to budge a single pyramid block. If one man slipped or fainted, the stone could roll back and crush the entire team. Sometimes, workers died in groups, buried beneath the monuments they were building. There are no heroic stories on temple walls for these people, just anonymous graves. Temple inscriptions won't mention this, but these workers got zero credit. Pharaohs carved their names everywhere, but not a single quarry hauler's name survived. Some burial sites show bones set with splints and infected wounds treated with honey, but that was just maintenance to keep valuable laborers moving. Their pay, barely enough for bread and beer, ration tokens worth about 10 loaves a month. There was no time to spend them either. Overseers carried whips, not punch clocks. Temple records mention crews working 30 days straight during the building season. Rest meant hunger or a beating. The cruelest part? Quarry haulers knew their work would last for thousands of years, but their own bodies ended up in unmarked graves. Next time you see a pyramid, remember, the base stones are the ones that killed the most workers. But that's nothing next to the horrors of the embalming workshop. An embalmer's apprentice in ancient Egypt worked in a world of rot and fear. At 12, apprentices got handed a bronze hook and learned by horror. Their first lesson? Scoop brains out through a corpse's nose. No training, just hope you didn't splatter the floor. If you messed up, you cleaned up the mess before you ate. 70 days of sweat, natron dust in your lungs, and scraping organs by hand. The stench never left. Apprentices packed bodies with salt that burned their throats and stuffed linen soaked in resin into gaping cavities. Papyrus records mention apprentices vomiting for weeks. Some never got used to it. Mistakes weren't just gross, they were dangerous. Tear a mummy's skin? That meant lashes. Lose a finger or toe to a slipped knife? Pray the gods forgave you before the priests found out. The fear of curses was real. Temple records talk about embalmers who vanished after botched mummifications. Nobody wanted that kind of trouble. They lived outside city walls, earned moldy bread, and prayed for scraps when families bribed masters, though little trickled to the kids. Embalming families paid extra taxes just to get their sons reassigned to safer trades. Some lied about their boys' ages to ship them off to the army early, anything to avoid a lifetime with corpses. Nobody wanted to marry a boy who smelled like death. The job broke bodies, too. Workers often coughed black dust by 20. Skin lesions from natron and rotting flesh were normal. The lucky ones graduated to wrapping duty. The rest kept fishing intestines out of nobles until they died young. They sealed pharaohs for eternity, their own graves, shallow pits free of mummification. Archaeologists find workshop skeletons dumped with their tools, as if death was their only rest day. Some jobs at least let you breathe fresh air, unless you ended up in a swamp with your legs in the water, hoping the next ripple wasn't a crocodile. Think harvesting papyrus sounds calm? Try doing it chest deep in a swamp crawling with crocodiles. Reed cutters in ancient Egypt spent their days hacking through papyrus stalks while standing in warm, murky water. The job wasn't just about gathering plants, it was about surviving every shift. The marshes were a minefield. One misstep and you could drop into a sinkhole or find yourself face to face with a crocodile hiding in the reeds. Workers sometimes tied makeshift floats to themselves, but if a croc grabbed you, that was the end. Medical records mention reed cutters coming back missing arms or legs, with notes about stopping the bleeding using hot tar. Even if you avoided the animals, the water did its own damage. Scratches from sharp reeds turned into infections so bad that toenails fell off. Swamp sores never healed in the constant damp, and the best treatment was a simple paste of honey and mold. Some tried wrapping their legs in linen, but that just made the infections worse. Mosquitoes swarmed so thickly that workers wore netting over their faces, which only trapped more heat. The sun beat down, and dehydration finished off plenty of cutters before the animals did. Drinking swamp water meant risking dysentery, but not drinking at all meant collapsing into the muck. Papyrus wasn't friendly either. The stalks oozed a sap that made skin break out in rashes. Animal fat helped a little, but it also attracted more insects. Bronze knives dulled fast, and replacements came out of your pay. Sometimes, workers had to saw at the stalks with nearly useless blades. Most cutters were convicts, paid in bread and beer, sometimes stolen from their own wages. The job was so deadly that slaves were considered too valuable to risk. When hippos charged through the marsh, work stopped on the spot. No work meant no pay, so crews either starved or risked sneaking back early and getting trampled. Archaeologists find reed cutter skeletons with crushed spines, arthritic hands, and teeth worn down from chewing tough stalks when food ran out. Some skeletons show healed crocodile bites, proof that even survivors had to go back into the swamp. Slow death in a swamp beats a quick stone smash, right? Not by much. And if you thought that was grim, imagine spending your nights in total darkness, armed with nothing but a stick, while something scurries or slithers just out of sight. Fancy a game of hide and seek with venomous cobras? Pest controllers in ancient Egypt did it for a living. Their shift started with a wooden club, a weak torch, and a shove into a pitch-black granary filled with Egypt's food supply, and everything that wanted to eat it. The second your torch hit the grain, things scattered, fur, scales, and sometimes both at once. Cobras and vipers didn't move fast enough to avoid you every time. Those towering 30-foot mud brick silos were the perfect home for disaster. They stored enough wheat and barley to feed a city, but also hosted carpets of rats so thick you couldn't see the floor. Snakes followed the rats in, curling up in the warm, dark corners. Temple records mention a controller finding 17 cobras in one spot. If you were unlucky, you'd step into a nest before you even saw it. Every shift was a horror show. You'd suffocate under slipping grain or choke on venom swelling your throat. Some controllers vanished when grain piles collapsed, only to be found later with rats gnawed into their bones. Snake bites were slower. Victims gasped for breath as their throats closed. There were dozens of folk cures, none reliable. Most workers just hoped not to get bitten at all. Night shifts were the worst, especially during harvest when granaries ran nonstop. New hires got these hours, and torches often went out as rats knocked them into the grain. Occasionally, torches sparked grain fires, burnt city rations in moments. Scribes noted the losses in dry, detached lines, as if it was just another day at the office. Pay was meager copper wages, barely enough for bread. The only bonus? Selling dead rats to medicine makers or live snakes to venom collectors. But that barely covered the cost of feeding cats or training mongooses, both of which had their own risks. The animals escaped, got trampled, or just refused to work when you needed them most. The job left scars, literally. Skeletons show healed bite marks on hands and ankles, crushed vertebrae from grain collapses, and skulls chewed down to bone by rats. Doctors wrote about controllers losing fingers, not just from bites, but from infections after constant contact with rat urine and grain dust. Why did anyone take this job? Most didn't last long enough to regret it. Temple censuses show that controllers either died or disappeared within 6 months. Granary records list 3 or more names for the same job in a single year. When there weren't enough volunteers, officials rounded up drunks and debtors to fill the ranks. No rat to swat? Next up, the dung collectors stink. Want the uncleanest job in Egypt? Try shoveling fresh donkey dung all day. Dung collectors started at dawn, scooping steaming piles from stables, alleys, and mud pits before the flies could swarm. Barefoot in fresh droppings, ammonia ate their skin. Honey and natron paste never healed fully. Tomb paintings show these workers with red, raw legs, always hunched over their baskets. Temple texts didn't bother with their names. They were simply the unclean ones. Nobody wanted this job. A father's plea scratched on a limestone ostracon says it all. Do not assign my son to the dung heaps, though he be slow of mind. That single line sums up the job's reputation. Collectors lived in mud huts outside the village, cut off from everyone else. Even slaves wouldn't marry into their families. Foremen used dung duty as a threat or punishment. Records from Deir el Medina show workers given to the waste for theft or skipping shifts. The hazards were everywhere. Methane gas from the pits left collectors with a hacking cough that never faded. The real nightmare was the parasite eggs in old piles, worms that burrowed into your gut and left you with bloody diarrhea, sometimes killing you before you ever saw a doctor. Medical papyri mention dungfoot and stomach worms as the collector's curses, but treatments were out of reach for most. Flies brought eye infections. Dig sites find skeletons with pockmarked eye sockets and missing teeth from years of malnutrition. Pay was even less than quarry haulers earned. The only real perk came during temple festivals, when collectors could sell dried dung bricks to pilgrims for a few extra coins. Even that was risky. Records mention collectors beaten for cheating priests out of sales. Most of the time, their wages barely bought bread. Archaeologists find their graves stacked outside cemeteries, wrapped in cheap linen, buried with cracked scoops and frayed baskets. Healed fractures show how often piles collapsed. Spinal damage was common from a lifetime bent over. Ironically, dung collectors kept Egypt's fields green, fueled family fires, and held up every brick with their labor. Yet they lived as outcasts, never tasting the harvest their hands fed. Tomb paintings always show them smaller than everyone else, eyes down, never meeting the gaze of the higher classes. Some tried to scrub away the smell with natron, but the eternal stench stuck for life. When they died, families paid extra just to keep them out of regular graves. Some didn't even get that. Bodies dumped in abandoned pits, left to rot with the waste. They fed Egypt's fields and fires, then died like garbage in unmarked pits. But if you think that's the bottom, wait until you meet the artists who painted Egypt's glory while choking on poison in the dark. Think painters have it easy? Try squatting in deadly fumes and whipping shadows. Tomb painters in ancient Egypt spent hours hunched in airless burial chambers, covering walls with scenes of gods and kings. But there was no glory, no name signed, no room for mistakes. They painted by number under oil lamps, no mistakes allowed. Overseers handed them strict color guides, and every line had to be perfect or the whip came out. This wasn't about creativity, it was about precision and repetition. Working in flickering light, painters strained their eyes until they burned. Medical texts mention onion juice as a remedy, but it probably just made things worse. The real danger was in the air and on their hands. The red pigment was loaded with mercury, the blue with arsenic. Every day, painters ground minerals into powder, breathing in dust that left their bones riddled with toxins. Many ended up blind or with blackened gums, their bodies showing the price of all those bright colors. Physical hazards were everywhere. They bent into every corner, earning spinal damage, and sometimes a crushing tomb collapse. Archaeologists find skeletons with compressed vertebrae and twisted knees. Sometimes, workers digging new chambers broke into older ones and buried painters alive. A priest's journal from Abydos notes 3 image makers lost during one reign, a reminder that even the artists weren't safe. Then there was the pressure. When a pharaoh died, painters had 70 days, the mummification period, to finish every inch of the tomb. That meant round-the-clock shifts, fines for slow hands, and a rare bonus if you managed to keep up. Payroll records mention wages docked for mistakes, and fines for errors left many penniless. A slip of the brush could mean 50 lashes. Mess up a royal cartouche or religious image, and you might not leave the tomb at all. Most painters earned just enough for bread. Only a few masters got decent pay, and the rest risked ending up in debt if they made too many mistakes. At the end of their lives, the irony was brutal. They gave pharaohs perfect afterlives, got one shot at a rough pauper's grave. Brushes and palettes sometimes buried with them, but no grand tombs, no painted walls, just cramped limbs and stained fingernails. The masterpieces survived, the painters didn't, and behind every flawless mural is a story of pain, poison, and silence. Just one more reminder that ancient Egypt's glory came at a price. Egypt's wonders came at a cost. Backs broken in the quarries, feet rotting in the swamps, lungs ruined in the tombs. These jobs would shut down any modern worksite in minutes. No safety gear, no sick days, just the overseer's whip and the threat of hunger. Next time you gape at a pyramid, spare a thought for the broken bodies beneath. The quarry hauler crushed under a stone, the reed cutter lost to the marsh, the tomb painter blinded by poison. Pharaohs got the credit, but the real builders were forgotten. If you want more of these untold stories, hit like and join the discussion below. Whose story shocked you most today?